Welcome back to another episode of Real Estate Developer Discussions with Katie Kim, where we don't just talk real estate, we talk legacy, leverage, leveling up. I'm your host, Katie Kim, developer, educator, and unapologetic advocate for building your wealth your way. And today we're tapping into the liquid asset you never saw coming. I've got Felicia Keith Jones with High Mark Distillery back in the studio today, a trailblazing CEO, investor, who is rewriting what it means to be a boss in both bourbon and business. She's dropping the masterclass on how to invest in bourbon barrels, the silent income stream that doesn't call, doesn't complain, and doesn't clog toilets for you. Passive income, is it truly a thing? In this deal, it is. This is the first and only truly passive investment I've come across, and I want to share it with you. So if you're ready to pour a glass for something bold, build wealth while you sleep, and backed by a woman who has all grit and no fluff, this episode's for you. Felicia, welcome back. I'm so excited to have you back here for another episode and to give us a masterclass in investing in bourbon.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And barrels are a little bit fun, so this will be a cool conversation. Yeah.
I love it. Well, let's jump in.
Okay. Well, the opportunity, let's just get right down to it, is 53-gallon barrels of bourbon. And so that opportunity doesn't come every day, but we feel that it is the right way to go ahead and build passive income and kind of add to or make it a major part of your wealth portfolio. And here's why. We have 53-gallon barrels that need filled. We have so many contracts that are ready to go. And there are only so many barrels that we, as High Mark Barrel House, can go ahead and put down with our funding, and our equipment's ready to go. The contracts are ready to go. And then who's going to fill those? And originally this came about because a gentleman wanted to come in and own part of the business. And I said, oh, no, we're not going to, I own 100% of it and we're not going to have other owners, but I appreciate that. And then there came the day when he came through the doors and he had a huge stack of Excel papers, and he was the CFO of Boeing before he retired. He said, is there any way that you would think about letting us go ahead and invest in barrels? And I thought, oh, well, tell me more. And so this is how it was born. What we do is the 53-gallon barrels, they are filled at 16% return on investment, and they cost $12,500 going down, meaning filled up. And then you are waiting for 4 years, because that's how long it actually legally takes to make a bourbon. So we're not allowed to bottle off of the barrels until 4 years and 1 day for those bottles coming off. And so for the investment, it is a 4-year investment, because we have moonshine until it matures to a beautiful bourbon. And so we have to wait for that last day before we can go ahead and bottle, or we can go older if we would like, but we sure can't come younger with the barrels. And so each year those barrels are gaining 16% return on investment annually. And then it is a 64% return on investment plus your initial funds at the end of investment period, the 4 years. And so it's been so much fun with all of the folks that have come on board and decided this is something that they would like to add to their portfolio. And it started off more as a fun little investment thing that you would add into your portfolio. And now we have some major players that are making this the majority of their portfolio, up into the, $500,000 at a time. And so is bourbon a good investment? That's what we'll explore here in just a second. And the answer is yes. So we'll give you a little sneak peek into the answer there.
I love it. So I love what you kicked off with the numbers, because that's, as our investors are watching, like you said, let's throw it on the table. 16% annual return. So we're talking simple interest for 16% for 4 years, which gives you that 64% return plus your original investment. And I know you're going to peek some other opportunities that go past that we'll talk to in a minute, but this is the catch, right? This is why you are here to talk about this. And these bourbons, as we mentioned, don't call you in the middle of the night, right? So as Felicia was saying, you were talking about the demand you have, right? So let's jump into that next.
Sure. So right now we have $15 million worth of contracts that are waiting in the background that are ready to be filled. So here's what takes place in our world. If you fulfill a contract, we happen to be located in Reno, Nevada. And so we're up by Lake Tahoe, where all the beautiful grains are grown and all the best clean water is. That's, Lake Tahoe water and all of our mountains for the runoff. And so it's a perfect position for the distillery to continue to grow. And as you start fulfilling some different contracts for the casinos, then they tell their buddies and say, hey, they are on demand. They absolutely meet every contract. This bourbon is unbelievable because we're using 100% Nevada grown grains. And so it's very nice sweet corn that is grown here. And so anyway, as they pass the word, then they say, you ought to get your contract in. And then, here come larger contracts. So we were just fine filling the ones that we had. And then here came a backlog of folks that would like to be on that waiting list. And I don't let large contracts jump in front of the small ones. Whoever got on that list first, I honor, because they are all part of, our community here. And I sure don't want to say, you're more important than the other, because we are all important. And now we've gone throughout the United States, and then we do have some international contracts as well. And so as the word spreads and as your bourbon becomes a little bit more popular, you create a little problem for yourself. You can't keep up with your own demand. And so that's where we're at with it. We absolutely can go ahead and grow the equipment, and then you can purchase the barrels, but then getting that liquid in is where we need a little bit of help from our community, meaning the United States, because that's exactly what takes place with these barrels going down. There are only so many that High Mark could afford to put down, and then you're waiting on it. So your cash flow it's caught. So you're waiting for any money to come back for yourself. That means you can't go ahead and grow the rest of the business. And then when our investors came on and said, what if we get a little play here, a little piece of the action? What if you share profits with us? That's how this was born. And man, it's been working beautifully. So we're almost at year 5 for the project. And it did have to be okayed through the Department of Taxation in Nevada, because they had never seen something like this before. In fact, there are only 5 distilleries in the nation that have permission to go ahead and do a project like this. And then you cannot forget the health department, because we're allowing people to go ahead and fill these barrels. And so we have to make sure that it's completely sanitary, and then they get to be hands-on and completely fill their barrel with the liquids and pound the bung in and wax the barrel if they'd like to, and name the barrel, because you don't want your spirits becoming all crazy. It's an old tradition that your spirits will calm down if they're named. And so we've just had, so much fun with every bit of this, but the money that is transferring has been phenomenal for our investors. And so we have helped every single person that has come through kind of add to their portfolio in a nice way where, Katie, you're right. It is truly passive. And I did fourplexes before this. That was my real estate endeavor. And so we had numerous fourplexes, and I did property manage for 17 years. And we did finally bring on a property manager, but there was never a day that wasn't top of mind and something was, needing my attention or had an issue. And that's why I really, really love the barrels. And so do our investors now, because and we invite you guys to come on board too, because these barrels are the sweetest little things. They just get filled. They like to go ahead and go into their pretend cave, which is a warehouse that's humidity and temperature controlled. It's dark and it's chilled, and they just chill for 4 years, and then out they come and they get bottled. And so if you're thinking that sounds too easy, it is. That is all that happens. It's just liquid in a barrel that ages, and then it's drank.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know you do a lot of fun things with your investors, which we'll get to in a second. So you have one thing that I want to wrap up and really bring home for our investors is this is 15 million in demand right now that's sitting on your desk, ready to sign and get into action. And it's not as if you're investing in like a startup. It is literally a backflow, right? Like when we talk about in real estate, I know one of your favorite expressions is that tenant in tow, right? Well, you have $15 million of contracts in tow, right? So, and you shared a little bit about yourself, but let's talk about just a little bit about Felicia. Let's like when you're building this company, because a lot of times people want to know the person behind the brand. So give us a little bit before we get into the brand itself on you and really that woman behind the whiskey.
Sure. So I headed up to Alaska on a sports scholarship. It was for gymnastics and was recruited up there. That was a little different. And then that was for Alaska, and then got a teaching degree and a history degree up there, and then headed out to the bush. That's the first place that you go if you're a young teacher. And that led into the ability for me to go ahead and sign on with, because you're always using small boats or small planes to get in and out of the bush communities, which is exactly like Australia and Africa. You have no roads connecting anywhere. And so you have villages along the coastal lines, and those are usually fishing villages. And then you have interior Indian tribes. So we have Eskimos and Indians there. And then for teaching, you're constantly in the air or in the boats. And I fell in love with being in the air. And so that led to me signing on with an aviation company and becoming a bush pilot. And so I thought that I was going to do that forever because it truly is a passion of mine, just an adrenaline rush. And it was interesting and exciting every single day. And I had made the statement to our entire crew that I will do this for the rest of my life. And then you realize your life might be really short. So anyways, the years were ticking by, and then I was married with two little boys. It became pretty obvious that it might not be the most sane choice because our weather changes so quick up there. And we always have wildlife in the way when we're trying to land and such. And so it is dangerous. And you know that when you sign on. But however, when you have numerous pilot friends that have gone down, it does start weighing pretty heavy on your head. Like, I need to be here for my family. So I did look into what else should I do. And then, as luck would have it, here came a family out of Ireland. And I was going to do their base camp for them, meaning you're the pilot and then you're setting up camp for them while they do a fishing trip. And they were three of their family members. So the grandfather, the son, and the grandson all came over from Ireland, and they were fourth generation distillers. And they could have had the choice of 12 other pilots that day, but I was lucky enough, honestly, to go ahead and be the one that guided them. And then they asked, would you ever consider coming over to Ireland and learning to distill? And that's what kicked off every bit of this. And so it was just a journey of saying yes to unusual opportunities all the way through. I didn't, looking back, I thought I was going to be a teacher forever. And so now I teach about bourbon and investing. Yeah, but it's been just a cool journey, and so many amazing people from all over the world that you get to meet in this world of bourbon. And people really are motivated and interested, and they geek out on it. And I just love that. It's a mix between chemistry and art always. And it's applied chemistry because you get to drink a little of it. So, yeah.
Pulling in really all of your areas of expertise in your history and I know you're going high level. So for those who want to dig a little bit more and get to know Felicia a little bit better, I'm going to put a link to the podcast we had her on first to really go into Felicia's background and dig in, because she was also involved with a freight company and, like she mentioned, the Bush Pilot Distillery. So she brings all her expertise into her business now, which is why it's been so successful, kicking off in Alaska, relocating to Reno. And as you see it here on the screen, like, we couldn't even fit everything that she's done. So definitely tune into that. And so I want to take a shortcut and go to the brand, because you, as you mentioned, you're 100% founder owned. And I love that, because I know your boys work with you and it's very family.
Yes.
And you have such integrity with the way you do business and how you do business, and even the barrel club, right? Like, even if you're buying the barrel at the end of the term, if it's not ready, if it's not up to your quality, you don't have to bottle it, and the investors still get their return. And so I want to dig into the brand a little bit, like how long you've been in business and how many, just overall in the brand.
Sure. So at Christmas, 2 weeks before Christmas, it will be our 16th anniversary of having a distillery. And they always say, if you can get past 3 years in a distillery, you've got something. And so now I almost feel like we're old timers. However, we're not generational like on the East Coast and down south. So putting it in perspective for our distillery, I founded the distillery up in Alaska in 2010. That was the first year that you could have a legal distillery. And so we were changing legislation to even make that a possibility. And then you would think, Nevada being the thirstiest state in the nation, of course they've had liquor and spirits going on forever. They have, but they weren't making them. And this is historical. They weren't allowed to, because the mafia was controlling every bit of liquid that came across those borders. And so it was, mafia ran until 2015, which is so young. So I always think it was like the biggest, coolest gift that I got to go ahead and pioneer again in a second state. And so I am the only female-owned distillery in Nevada. And then putting it in perspective, we have so much room to grow in this thirstiest state because we only have 17 distilleries total. Colorado, for instance, has 1,500, depending on, if they're active or not at the time. But that's a huge amount. That means every community has one. And here in Nevada, we're all just barely starting up, and getting all of our beautiful bourbons out the door was a feat of its own. And nobody realized that Nevada had such beautiful corn and wheat and grains growing here, and rye and barley, and because they were only used for livestock. They didn't need the grains for anything else because it wasn't legal. And so now here we come with all these beautiful bourbons, and we are starting a bourbon trail. And it's not just for the West Coast, it'll actually be for Nevada, because man, we're tasty over here. So
I love that. And that really speaks to the brand and the grit and the growth. And I know you're just getting started on online sales. And so there's so much growth that's happening in your company that we'll get to. And we talked about in the other podcast episode. I want to lean in for those who have not really been introduced to the bourbon industry other than by glass, right? So
Sure.
talk to us a little bit about the market of bourbon.
Well, first of all, I have to honestly say that you will never be a better American than when you are drinking bourbon or when you are making bourbon. And that is a fact because the US government decided many years ago that the only word that was going to be, America only owns one word. We own the word bourbon and we defend it with our military. And so there are two kings in the world. It's Scotland with their Scotch and America with our bourbon. And then below that come all of the whiskeys of the world. But these two kings absolutely command and demand attention throughout the world, and nobody's allowed to step on our toes. And then there are some rules as to how you put bourbon together. And so the federal government determines that it has to be American white oak barrels, it has to be 51% sweet corn or more, and it has to be aged for a certain amount of time in the barrels. And so they based everything off of the 53-gallon barrels, which is what you're allowed to invest in, as 4 years. And so anyway, then if you have smaller barrels, that's less time. If you go way up with the huge barrels that you can use as a camping, you can sleep in those things. They're so huge. Then that would take more time. But off of the 4-year barrels, you have 53 gallons, and that's 265 to 267 bottles that come off of there. But the percentage of growth for our industry has been just phenomenal. And one of the things that, as you can see on the screen, you guys are welcome to go ahead and read. We just keep growing as an industry. And for the first time ever in the history of the United States, in 2024, spirits surpassed the demand for beer. And so it's only a myth that bourbon's going away or people are stopping to not drink as many spirits. And we can get into that later because that was the funniest report that came out. And then it's, been kind of looked at and analyzed. They're like, wait a minute, who paid for this report? And so anyway, we'll get into that in a minute if you want to. But I did want to go ahead and mention all of the good percentages that you can see on the screen there. There's one other that I would love to go ahead and mention is the demand for bourbon has gone up in the last 5 years. It has gone up 586% in demand. So what you're seeing are all of the sales, and then the demand, we haven't even met the demand yet. And so if you are a good distillery or a great distillery, then you absolutely have a backlog of contracts of people saying, let me in. I want, give me some of this. So for Nevada, a lot of ours goes to casinos, and then we have grocery chains and we have hotels, a lot of hotels in this state, and it is an entertainment state. Pairs nicely with a nice bourbon. And so we've had phenomenal success here. And we originally started in Alaska, but all of our grains always came from Winnemucca, Nevada. And so we've always had a tie to Nevada because we don't grow grain in Alaska. And so finally decided to go ahead and bring our distillery down to where the grains are and get going. So we were a cruise ship stop up in Alaska, and that was absolutely fun and exciting. But we were constantly having to pay the high price of shipping and bringing everything in. Now, Katie had already hinted that our family owned a freight company up in Alaska. So I did kind of understand the process and knew how to go ahead and get some price cuts for our shipping. However, bringing it down to the source, genius. Why didn't we think of that sooner? So now we've had in this last 5 years just huge growth because we positioned properly.
Yeah. And you mentioned about this article. And so I always like to put stats and numbers up there, right? But I love even more to talk about them when they're contradictory. And so we were talking on a call with a potential investor, and she was like, hey, I was researching this and I saw this article. And Felicia was like, let me talk about that article. So talk about that, because if somebody does start to Google, right, like
Sure.
talk about bourbon, this is an article that recently came out. And so I want you to hear from Alicia's insight in the industry on that article, because I think it really further speaks to the demand and the growth for the bourbon. And then we're going to get into the investment structure.
Sure. So this article came out, and it originated in California, and quite a bit of money was put behind it. And so not only was the article written, but then it was just dispersed everywhere like wildfire. And so DISCUS is the Distilled Institute of Spirits United States. They're the regulator for alcohol throughout the United States. And that's out of Washington, D.C. And so anyway, this article stated that bourbon and spirits were going down in popularity popularity. In fact, non-alcoholic drinkers were way more prevalent than anybody that was drinking spirits. And so it was a thing of the past. And we thought, man, that's interesting. We better get behind this and see if it's true. Anyway, the interesting thing was they were doing that entire study on Gen Z and what do they prefer to drink. Well, that's cool. That's interesting, you know, because that's the youngest group. However, they forgot to mention that half of Gen Z hasn't even aged out yet. They're not 21. They can't legally drink yet. So it was a half of a study. And then those that were drinking of drinking age, so 21 and older, this report stated that they only wanted to microdose in mushrooms, which sounds a little dangerous to me, but that was their preference. So they were spending their disposable income on microdosing mushrooms rather than buying any spirits for their entertainment. And we thought, is that true? And so as the national, study kicked off in Washington, D.C. to see, let's do some research here. Is this a new trend that's taking place? And they discovered that it was the mushroom industry themselves out of California that had put this report up. And so interesting that theirs is the most popular now and that no one's going to drink.
So that whole story, and that's where I always say, like, source check, right? Even with investors and even with my kids, right? It's like source check, make sure you know where the data and the information is coming from. And so the market for bourbon is huge. And as Felicia's saying, the demand up 586% over the last 5 years. So it is definitely a market and an industry that to look at, especially for alternative investing and for passive. I'm going to keep saying passive investing because it truly is. Let's start to talk about the investment structure itself. So, your tagline of where legacy meets liquidity. So walk us through, how do you invest in your Bourbon Club? How does it work?
Sure. So for the barrels, you would just go ahead and we now have it nice and simple, but truthfully, those that, started with us, it was very organic. So it was a little rough back then. And thank goodness they stuck with it and wanted to see this, come to fruition, because it has come a long ways. You guys will get to go ahead and have all of the bells and whistles, and it's nice and smooth. And so I would log into our investor portal. And then as you log in, it would go ahead and give you quite a bit of information. You could go ahead and review the investment documents. And then right there, you can go ahead and sign and invest. So it doesn't take a lot of extra time. It's kind of one-stop shopping. We're putting barrels down every day anyway. So never feel like there's any pressure to go ahead and you have to do it right now kind of thing. We're going to be continuing to do barrels for many, many, many years. So when it's the right investment for you, then all of the information is there. And then it's at the click of your fingertips. And then as you invest, then those 53-gallon barrels do take 4 years. So you'll start your little baby barrel. And if you'd like to come to Reno, Nevada at our distillery, High Mark Distillery, and put that barrel down, meaning fill it with your friends, you sure can. And so it's a party going in, and it's a party when that thing comes out too. And so you have charcuterie boards and welcome cocktails, and then you explore a few different bourbons that we've already aged that are going to be similar to what you're putting down. And it's just a fun afternoon of exploring, or evening. And then your barrel goes into the barrel houses and starts to mature. And that does take the 4 years. So each year is a huge change in that barrel. And it's beautiful to see. The color comes on and the aromas start to kind of come to life. And then you might hit an ugly cycle. And so, because these are living, breathing barrels, they were an American oak, tree just a little bit ago. And so it might push through some sap, and then halfway through your cycle, at year 2.5, you're like, oh, good God, I made the worst thing in the world. And then it absorbs back through the wood and it pushes back through some beautiful tones, and it's gorgeous by the end. But never give up on a barrel. And so I do always say that, you always get paid out at 4 years. And a day is when we get to bottle, but your payday is on the 4 years mark, the anniversary there for your barrel. And I get to go ahead and decide, is your barrel the best that it can possibly be? Or maybe you have, 15 barrels down. Some folks do. But is it the best that it can ever be? Or do I need to go ahead and hold on to it for a little bit longer? So you always get paid out. I might need to go ahead and hold that barrel, because it only takes one bad barrel to ruin your reputation. And so if it's not high quality, it might need to go ahead and go 5 years or 6 years. That's on me. So I would just go ahead and hold that in the barrel house, because oddly enough, nature doesn't care that we want paid on a certain day. It does its own thing and it has its own calendar. And so when that wood reacts with the alcohol and decides this is a beautiful barrel now, that's called the honey spot. And so we're always looking for the honey spot. And if it doesn't hit at the 4 years, we wait just a tiny bit longer. But your payday is also kind of a celebration because you get options. And so I always thought it was just going to be folks that said, thank you, that was a fun experiment. And now I want my money back and I want my ROI that I earned. I was trying to pay everybody off. They kept saying, no, hold on to our funds. Like, is there any way that you could let us roll this over? And we thought, well, that's interesting because it's a barrel. So some folks like to go ahead and roll their initial funds over. And then they have a payday for their ROI. So that's a cool option. And then others, so that's called barreling or rollover. And then barreling up are the folks that are like, no, I don't want any taxation on this at all. Please go ahead and keep all of the funds and I'm going to pay up to the next level. So it might look like this. Say you bought 2 barrels and you're at $25,000 that you invested. And then with your return on investment, you've earned your ROI. And so you have a few thousand that you made off of the return on investment, and you'd like to go ahead and add the initial or the next little amount of money up to 1 more barrel. And so then you are gaining, you're just adding to your wealth portfolio. You're gaining interest on all of those. And so you'll see it in another slide here in just a moment. But we thought, or me personally, I thought that everyone would be like, yay, payday, and they'd be so excited about that. And they're like, no, keep it. So we're at last year we were at 97% retention. This year, 2025, we're at 98% retention. So people don't want out of the program. And I can honestly say, as the stock market, dips and dives, when it crashes, it is a direct correlation to how many people want barrels because we don't dip and dive. It is 16% return on investment locked in. And so it's 64% return on investment at the end of your journey. And that's a beautiful payday. Like that's sexy. That gets people excited. Even me. Like, yeah.
You created this amazing opportunity for people to participate and help you grow your business. And you still have control of your business. And I love how you've done the Barrel Club because investors get the return and you want to honor that commitment and that investment in your business. And you still want to honor the integrity of the product that's coming out from High Mark Distillery, everything in the name, right? And so looking at this, a $12,500 minimum investment, like most people can't get into any investing game at that price. So it is accredited investors only. Now, that doesn't mean you can only invest 12,500. Like Felicia said, you can invest 100,000. That's a lot of times what a lot of our investors are coming in at 100,000. You can dip your toe in. Felicia shared with me a couple of them were like, this is too good to be true. I'm going to buy a barrel, not buy it, but invest in a barrel. And then after the term comes up, they're like, oh, wow, this really paid out. It did what it said. And then it's like, okay, now here's 100,000, here's 500,000. So we're doing a big raise to get your backlog unclogged, if you will, and get it unintended, get it flowing. And so of that 15 million. So there's opportunities to invest more. What you said, I want to break down that math real quick. So at the end of that 4 years where you say like barrel up. So if they're getting a return, and I'm doing some back of the napkin math here of like 16 of that 25,000, it's 16,000. And then so they would add 9,000 to even barrel up to the
Correct.
to 2 more, right? And so
Correct.
now you're looking at a $50,000 investment with only adding 9 in, right? And so now your barrel up is an opportunity to compound your investment, even though that 16% is a simple interest every single year. So I love that. And the thing that blew me away, if you're watching this is an amazing return, right? And she's not only had, as Felicia said, 98% return investors, which it was 97 last year. And I want to talk about the other layers of protection that you do not see with other investments. And so while she has never missed a payout, which is huge investment world, talk to us about what we're seeing on the screen here with this security and integrity of the program.
Sure. So I think kind of the romance and the love of this whole program is that our barrels, as they're laying there just being quiet and nice and sweet in the barrel house, they're doing all the heavy lifting. And so you already have 64% of your work done for the next investment. That's the 64% return on investment. And then it would never sit right with me to not make sure that our investors were taken care of. And so I've gone above and beyond. And then, it might be interesting to remember that I'm one of the major investors, like this was all out of pocket. This was not, we don't have any loans. We didn't take on any investors for the company at all. And so every bit of this was out of, me trying it out on myself first. And so the multi-layered protection that we have is I do have 3 insurance policies. And so I'll just really fast, of course, the one for the, to make sure that all of the liquids are covered, and that's per gallon. So I do have to go ahead and cover every gallon of alcohol with an insurance policy. And that's in case, a forklift hits it, or we have it's never happened, but a fire or a flood, those are already covered. And then I make sure that we go 3-man deep. And so it is the top 3 folks in our distillery that are covered. So myself, what if I croak? And so that's one of the questions that I get to. They're like, what if you die? So like every single day when I talk to investors, they've killed me off. And so
We've all experienced
there's a whole life insurance policy on me to make sure that, they could hire another me. And then it is also our lead distiller. He's the gentleman that's keeping the program going for all of the spirits coming in and out of grains and inventory, and keeping the stills going and making sure all of the distillers below him are up to par and doing a perfect job. And so he's kind of like the manager of the production facility. And then we also cover the lead for our sales department. And so that is necessary to make sure that, we keep selling the bourbons. There's not a stop there. It would have to take 3 of us out before anything changed. And then we also have an insurance policy for any of the spirits that, might need to be aged longer and such, to make sure that the payout is always there. And so that's a nice reserve insurance. And then for the production redundancy, what that means is that every barrel that we put down, we make sure that 2 barrels for High Mark are put down. And that's always been a goal, to make sure that if I had to pull from High Mark's inventory to cover any of the contracts, in addition to your barrels, we've got it. And then there's never a slowdown of exchange of, contract funds coming in, because as those contracts get bigger and everybody gets thirstier, and we get the larger casinos that are saying, yes, bring us on board, then we are able to go ahead and meet that demand. And then one thing that is important that a lot of distilleries might not have is that all of our barrel houses are completely owned by High Mark Distillery. And so the warehousing for all of the grains and the equipment, those are 100% paid off. So now in our growth phase, as we need to add more equipment, then some of those, a little bit of those funds will go to sizing up, but there's no debt on High Mark. And so that was extremely important to me, that if I was going to do this project, I was going to make sure that I got to sleep at night. And so if we could only afford small equipment in the beginning, which is exactly what we had, then that's what we started with. And then I made sure that we had, sales to go ahead and demand larger equipment. And so that's what we've gone off of. That, in my opinion, the good idea of how to go ahead and run a company where you get to sleep in the evenings and make sure that also your investors get to sleep at night. We're not gambling with this. We are a gambling state, but we don't.
So, we don't gamble with the bourbon. Yeah. And
absolutely not. No, I wanted this rock solid and make sure that it was a good foundation for, anybody that was involved. This has grown because people wanted in on something that was so solid. And so that's why it's now being, you're invited to go ahead and join as well, because we do feel like here's one more growth step, and we need to say yes to some of these contracts. Those owners of casinos have been waiting, and we're going to be thrilled to go ahead and tell them, yes, 2025, 2026 is when we'll be able to go ahead and sign you on. And then because we've been putting down spirits all along, we have a little over 4,000 barrels in storage. Then when they ask for a contract, they don't have to wait that 4 years to get the volume. We get to go ahead and pay out. It's aged. It's ready. So
perfect. Yeah. I love that. And so I put here on the screen of the barrel funds. And I think I love the fact of knowing that you've built the business, really on your back, and you haven't taken on unnecessary debt. You've really kept the company healthy, and you're really starting to see the fruits of that labor, pun intended a little bit here, with the spirits that you also have. And I want to do real quick, I'm going to show some of these testimonials, but I want to, for the sake of getting to the fun of the Barrel Club. So So I know I'm going to come back to this because there are so many testimonials that I know you have and we can share, and we would be happy to give those to people who are coming. I know Taylor, one of your sons, has bought his truck, but
Yeah.
we're going to come back to these. Like, the testimonials are great, but I want to share the fun that you bring. Not only is you have integrity, you have security, you have a hell of a great return, great insurance opportunities, but you also have fun with the Barrel Club. So I want to jump, if we can, to the perks that you put, because as you mentioned before, barrels are a little boring, but there's nothing boring about the High Mark Distillery Barrel Club.
Yeah, so we've just had way too much fun with that. So we do have private barreling parties, and that's when you can come in and fill that barrel with your friends if you would like to. And so invite up to 10 to 12 folks, and they'll all be hands-on with it, because I truly believe, I guess that's my little nerdy teacher side coming back out, but I truly believe that people learn and love something if they get to touch it, hands-on here. And so you will be filling your barrel if you'd like to. And say you have, 15 barrels, which, many of our investors do. They're not going to fill all of those. Pick one, and that'll be your party. And then put us to work, make us go ahead and fill the rest of those. And they'll be filled by pumps and hoses instead of by hand, which by hand is so much fun. And that's how it all started in this industry. So back in the day, you'll be transported back in time and history with the whole program that we show you when you're there. And then we always feel like our tasting room is just a big living room of all kinds of friends from all over the world that like to gather and sip. And to this day, I don't have any TVs in there on purpose, because I want people to go ahead and visit, like really old school visit with each other. And the friendships that have struck up in there is just crazy. And now we have folks that have, traveled to each other's country to go see each other because they met in the tasting room. And nothing makes me more proud than that, because that means that we've got the right vibe. Like, people are able to go ahead and relax and enjoy a good bourbon and have a conversation. Then it became a thing where they were like, well, we want to meet more of the investors. And so that's why we have 2 parties a year. And so the Barrel Investor Club, we always have a summer party, and that's the barrel branding party. And so it's like a Western style. Instead of branding cattle, you're branding your barrels, and you physically get to go ahead and brand with our High Mark brand on those barrels. And then it's a big barbecue, and we always bring in a top-notch Nashville country star. And it's crazy, all of the gentlemen that have said yes to coming, because, it's the West Coast and we're not quite as cool as Nashville, but boy, they sure enjoy coming to that bourbon party. And so we've had just phenomenal artists that play up close and personal with all of our investors, and only our barrel investors are invited to these events, so they can bring their family members. And then it's just you always get a collector's bottle with whoever the artist was is on that bottle, and it's the best bourbon that I can possibly bring through that year. And so please, if you join the Barrel Investing Club, open those darn bottles. I have so many folks that don't want to open them because of who was on the front, and they always get it autographed and such. But it's beautiful bourbon, so please sip the bourbon and keep the bottle. So anyway, this has just become something that people really look forward to. And then at Christmas time, early December, we always do a Bourbon Country Christmas. And so this year, I'll give you a little sneak peek is what's going to go on. But we will have Scottish Highlander cows with the Christmas hats on for an outdoor photo shoot with bourbons, because you'll all get to hold your own bourbons. And then you keep those bourbons. And then we always show off something that is brand new to High Mark Distillery that hasn't gone to the public yet. And so last year, we were able to go ahead and show a couple of different things. Our new line of chocolates that are our bourbon, and then our Copa Ika, which is a Hawaiian coffee rum that was a chocolate ganache in one of them. And so these are top-notch chocolates. I wasn't going to say yes to chocolates if they tasted like, sugar and wax. And these are beautiful. It's like grandma's old bourbon balls for the bourbon. And so all of our investors get those gifts first before I ever release to the public. And then we had a book that was written last year, and it was a business book. And so that author, she had 10 pages about the amazing hospitality that she had experienced through High Mark Distillery. And so Lindsay Smith was the author, and we flew her in to go ahead and autograph everybody's book. Not that you're wanting to read a, book about hospitality, but we figured probably High Mark's never going to be this cool again to get in a book. So we better, enjoy it while the moment was here. And then, everybody gets to interact with the country music artist and their family, because usually they bring their family with them. And it truly is family oriented. And so we always have behind the scenes tastings. The new project, I'll just hint at that. It's a good sized ranch. And so it'll be High Mark Ranch and Distillery. Has all kinds of extremely cool farm to table pop-ups and dinners and orchard dinners, because it comes with an orchard for all the fruits. And then you'll be able to harvest grain with us if you'd like to, and all of the fun that goes with being in the outdoors. And that's truly where my heart is anything outdoorsy with all of this. And so I want to make sure that it's a little reprieve and retreat for those that might be living in the larger cities. So come on out to the country and enjoy, but it'll be, 5-star as well. Let's see.
And
The network, I have to say, is probably one of the most important things that any investor can get, because it won't just be barrels that you're investing in. If you want to go ahead and visit with any of the other investors, they've all got phenomenal projects going on. And it's not a networking community at all where you have to like come and give your business cards. These are just friends that all have one thing in common. They like bourbon and they like people. So maybe they have two things in common. And so they do like to go ahead and
good return.
Very good return. They do enjoy good money. That's right. That is very true. And most of them are real estate investors as well, but just people from all walks of life. We do quite a few projects with wineries. And so if you want to go visit our sister wineries that we work with, you sure can. And why would you do that if you love bourbon? Well, because when your bourbon barrel's finished, you may want to go, you can only use that thing one time. That's why bourbons are so expensive. It has to be a virgin barrel every single time. And so once you've drained out, emptied your bourbon barrel, what are you going to do with it? Well, some folks, rather than filling it with a whiskey or a rum on premise with us, might like to go fill that with a bourbon barrel aged Cabernet. And so your bourbon comes out in top of that Cabernet and smooths off all the edges of the cab. Then you've got another experience at a winery. And that's only 2 hours from us here. So for Napa. So anyway, we've just had way too much fun with all of this, bringing, different industries together for the fun. And we do many large conventions and such, but that's not what the barrel investing is about. That's our close-knit few hundred people that really do all know each other and like to see each other each year, twice a year, hopefully, if you're able to make both parties. And I have to brag a tiny, tiny bit, because now this cracked me up. We have people, so I still send out old school invites with paper, the invites in the mail, because I still think it's kind of cool to get. We also have the digital, but I've had people go ahead and send back in the RSVP, and they have put on the bottom, we're going to ditch our cousin's wedding to come to this. Your party's better. And you're like, what? So we're so proud. We've had aunts and uncles that have gone to the graduation for a half hour at the college, and then they zip over to the distillery, and they've flown in from somewhere else with the relatives. They bring them all. And so that just makes me really proud that we're probably putting on a pretty decent party. So yeah, but it's not every day you get to brand things and play with bourbon. So it is unusual.
So the barrels are boring. The barrel club is anything but boring.
Yeah, we're pretty cool. Yeah, all of we investors. Yeah.
and Felicia, you don't like to talk about this, but I always love when I work with business owners that give back to the community and they give back to nonprofits. Can you share a little bit? It's not on the bourbon investing, but share a little bit about the impact you have on the camp.
Sure. I started
because you don't do it for this reason, but I want people to know where your heart is, and that you built this business with grit. You're really, the Barrel Club is truly an extension of your family, as I'm sure people can feel that coming out. And she doesn't like to brag about this. That's why you see her hesitating here, guys. But that to me is where the real talking's done, right? Where the real spirit is, pun intended, is coming from.
Sure. So I started Fallen Heroes Family Camp about 17 years ago now. That is it services when we have a military gentleman, usually, and it might be a lady, that falls in action. So when they are killed overseas, then who's taking care of the widow and the children? And so anyway, I started Fallen Heroes Family Camp because I wanted to make sure that we offered something that was, because my entire family is military. In fact, for Discus, I'm on the military committee to make sure that, in other countries, we get American spirits into our bases. They're not allowed to block us. We own those American bases. And so anyway, this has always been, a passion project for me, because my parents met in the Army. And then I have 4 brothers that have all served in different branches of the military. And then our, the Jones side of the family, everybody has served. And I wanted to be able to give back something to the mothers and children. And so it's a ranch out of Nashville. So it's been a wonderful collaboration out of Nashville, because that's one of the largest hospitals for our military men and women when they come back, if they've been severely injured. It's where you go if you've had limbs that had to be, that were blown off or had to be amputated, or you have PTSD and you've got the shrapnel in your brain, like all kinds of major things. And so these men and ladies are beat up pretty bad. And we have children that have lost their hero, which was their dad or their mom in service. And so it's a delicate group of kids that really feel like there's nothing left to live for. They are pretty depressed, and the moms need, usually we're working with moms, the widows, but the moms need a little bit of direction and reprieve. Like, how do we navigate through this? Then we've paired now with Wounded Warriors, and that has been fantastic, because those gentlemen might have one arm and one leg on the same side completely blown off. They will still show up every day for the Fallen Heroes Family Camp and strap themselves, like they're belted on to the horses, and show up for those kids, because once they're in the saddle, they're a whole man again. And they can move and navigate just like they always did. And so it's a huge boost to them, and they will never go ahead and disappoint a child. And as we all know, there are 22 or more a day of military gentlemen that once they get home, they were trained to do something very specific, and that's not needed once you get home. And so that's, to be a war fighter. And then how do you assimilate back into society, especially when you're blown to pieces and there's half of you, you left whole, and then you come back a totally different person. So when they come back, they will never, ever disappoint a child. They might go ahead and harm themselves, but they will not, miss out on a kid. And then with Fallen Heroes Family Camp, they're able to go ahead, and the kids are interacting with the military guys, and just, you see stars in their eyes, because they have someone that they just adore, that they're looking up to. And then the moms get to have a little break and get to visit with other moms and make friendships right there that they can continue on for life. And so it's been very beneficial. And then, why did we do that? Because my husband passed away when we were 33. And that is the earliest camp. It wasn't a camp then. We just did it at a family ranch of some really good friends of ours. And that was the first time that I saw my boys come back to life. So anyway, yeah.
So, well, and Felicia, I thank you and I didn't prep that I was going to ask that question. So I'm sorry that it surprised you a little bit on that.
No, it's fine.
But to me, Felicia, what you have done with your company and with this opportunity is life-changing. And so I'm getting a little choked up. I'm gonna bring it back, because I know we've talked about like your heart and your business and all the opportunity and the investment. And so if this does sound like something that if you're listening or watching this, that you want to get involved with, you want to be a part of this, literally this wave of bourbon investment, and building not only your investment portfolio, but building a community, an opportunity to give back. All of that comes with being in the Barrel Club. As Felicia said, the barrels are boring, the Barrel Club is not, and it's very impactful. And so I'm so honored to know you and to be a part of this journey, a small part of this journey. And I put on the screen here the kind of the high level of the investment details. And there's a QR code there that you can go to directly to High Mark Barrel Club page. And we are working on getting that investor portal up now. I'm hoping by the time we get this release, it'll be up and you can go in. And as Felicia walked us through, you have those easy steps, 1, 2, 3 to go through. She's always available for questions. And so I know right now, as you see, there's some pictures of the amazing parties that we have. And I'm going to give a quick close out. Is there anything else you want to add, Felicia, to this on there? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to choke you up.
No, that's okay. Yeah. I think just probably making sure that everybody knows that I am right here if you have any questions. So if this was informative, very cool. And then if you really truly want to just give me a call, visit in person about it, you sure may. And I'm always accessible. And you can do Felicia at highmarkdistillery.com. You're welcome to really truly get in contact with me and throw me all of your good curveballs if you have questions. And then the one thing that I can say that still cracks me up, the one thing that we can't do for investing. So we can do, some folks have wanted to go ahead and do to use their Roth IRA to invest. And so we do have the sheriff's union, the police union, and the teachers union that go ahead and like to use their funds for investing in barrels. And so we have a third party company that is able to go ahead and work with those that have Roth IRAs and traditional IRAs, and then self-directed, you could do yourself. And then we've also had folks that have invested through college savings funds. So they already started the college savings fund. It might be the grandparents that started it for the grandkids, or it might be the parents that started. And so they were putting in funds for their child and then realized, man, we're not making very much headway. Like, let's take those out, beef it up with barrels, get that return and put it back in. So you sure can. And then I have to give a shout out to Katie, because as we were talking one day, Katie said, well, why don't we start that younger? Like, why don't we have a baby barrel program? And so now we do. And so if you want to go ahead and start, when your children are just born or little bitty guys, and start putting into the barrels, that kind of formed off of my two sons that decided, what? There's passive investing? Like, they're teenagers. They hadn't even realized that was a thing. And they were like, so if I put some of my hard-earned money in here, because they were earning it, put that money in here, and then it just sits and ages, then we can go ahead and have a truck, like that'll be our first truck. The truth is, yes. So that's how both boys bought theirs. And I do love that, we have some just not testimonials, but real life examples. So yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Felicia.
Okay. You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Hey friend, before you go, I want to say this. If real estate development has been on your heart or on your mind, we've built lanes to help you walk it out wherever you're starting from. Just exploring? Start out with our free live masterclass. Ready to do the reps and build the strategy? Join the Developer 101 Bootcamp. Already active and need to level up? Step into the Real Estate Development Academy. You don't have to figure this out alone. We can teach you, we guide you, and we walk with you. So head over to katiekim.com and book a call with our team today, and let's figure out the best first or next step for you. You're not behind, you're not too late, and you're definitely not too early. You're right on time. Let's go. The information in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not legal advice. It's not financial advice. It's not investment advice. Real estate development, like any investment, carries risk. Before you make decisions, you should always consult a licensed professional, your attorney, your CPA, or your financial advisor, to name a few, to make sure you're making the right choice for your situation. I'm here to share insights and strategy, but you're responsible for your own decisions, and each situation is unique. So make sure you contact your professional team to give you your specific guidance for your specific case, as each real estate development's different and unique and has its own challenges and opportunities.